Hello, I'm Mrs. Jansen. Let's draw radial design op art together. Optical is a word that is used to describe how our eyes see things. Op art or optical art is often called art that tricks our eyes. Artists use lines, shapes, colors, and patterns in special ways to create the illusion of rhythm and movement in their artwork. Overlap means to extend one object over part of another object. Notice how many times you see overlap when you look at this image. Today we'll be using overlap as we create our art. Radial design or radial balance is a design that starts from the center. Art elements such as lines, shapes, colors, and space are arranged to create visual balance. The arrangement forms a circular shape or design. Artist Bridget Riley is best known for showing rhythm and movement in her artwork. She was born in 1931 and lives in London, England. Her artwork is in museums throughout the world. Let's look at these images and see how this artist plays tricks on our eyes. At the top left, this might remind you of a checkerboard. Notice that the artist creates the illusion that it's folding. Notice how this artist starts with squares on the right, and those squares change to rectangles and eventually lines where this appears to fold. Now you'll notice to the right of that fold how these lines become rectangles again and eventually squares. Now let's look at the image on the top right. This might remind you of a waterfall. Notice how this artist uses different wavy lines in different colors. The image on the bottom left creates a spiral effect or movement. I'd like you to think of this as concentric circles, circles that share the same center. I'd like you to notice, if we start at the outermost circle, that this artist is using diagonal lines. And notice how those diagonal lines change. They are wider, and then they become narrower and closer together. And this is what's creating that spiraling effect or movement. Notice how the next circle starts with the diagonal line in a different direction. And it continues to do the same thing. Starts out wider, and the space is wider, and then becomes narrower with a narrower space. If you look at each circle, notice how each time the direction of the diagonal line changes, and as they go closer to the center, how close those diagonal lines are to each other. M.C. Escher is another artist that's famous for creating optical illusions in his artwork. He's a historic artist that lived in the past from 1898 to 1972, and this is actually a self-portrait. This artist often used pencil. And here we see this artist holding a sphere. So this is a drawing of the artist's hand, and the sphere shows his self-portrait in the reflection. M.C.R. Escher was born in Holland, and he went to college to study architecture, but decided to study graphic art instead. So when you look at his art, you definitely can see that some of his art was influenced by architecture, especially this image on the left. You might have seen this image in a movie or in a book. Notice that the illusion is that these people can be walking or sitting on the side of buildings, and very often these staircases lead nowhere or they stop. If you look toward the bottom right, you'll see a table where people are sitting, where the dishes are on the table. So we know that that's not possible with gravity. So MC Escher showed the impossible in his artwork and created illusions. This image of two hands drawing is often mistaken for a real hand drawing another hand. His art is also in museums throughout the world. So today you'll need a piece of paper, a pencil, black pen, or Sharpie, and you can choose what you'd like to draw with. You'll see the screen change so that we can draw together. So you can decide how you'd like to place your paper. It can be landscape, horizontal, or it can be vertical, portrait style. And I'm going to draw with pen today. You can choose to draw with pencil, pen, or Sharpie marker. The first thing we're going to do is draw a rectangle together. And we're creating a radial design. So it's going to start from this center point or rectangle. And we're using overlap. So as we turn our paper, we're going to draw another rectangle. Now these rectangles overlap, so we only have to draw the side that we see. They can be different sizes and go in different directions. Our art today is influenced by the work of art that we saw on the first slide, but the interesting part is that everyone's is going to be different. So as you turn your paper, you can draw the rectangle in different directions, but we continue to draw around that central point. This design makes me think about a deck of cards, and I'm thinking that I just dropped a deck of cards on the floor and what that looks like. So we're going to continue turning our paper, drawing different shape rectangles, larger, smaller, in different directions, and we're going to fill this space. So every time you turn your paper, you're making judgments, you're making choices, you're deciding what direction or what size you'd like to draw the next rectangle and how you'd like that rectangle overlapped. Everyone's artwork is going to look very different. And remember, there's no right or wrong. Remember, your rectangles can be larger or smaller, and they can go in many different directions. And our goal is to fill the space, to create visual interest and visual balance. And now we've filled most of this up, so go ahead and you can turn your paper and look at other areas where you need to add rectangles. All right, so now that you've got your design drawn, now what you're going to do is you're going to go back to the slide presentation and look at the different line designs and think about one design that you'd like to fill each rectangle with. You can choose from those designs or use those as idea starters or create your own. So I'm going to start with a design, and as you draw, here's what I recommend is you start on the outside and work in. You'll see how that works best as you work on the overlapped rectangles. So I'm going to just use a very simple line design, and I'm going to keep the same line design on every rectangle, but it can change. Sometimes it can have a wider space, and it also can go in different directions depending on how that rectangle is overlapped. That line design changes. You will definitely notice that starting on the outside and going toward the center will work best. I think it's a lot more challenging to start from the center and work out. So now I know you've got the idea, and you can continue to turn your paper as you fill it with different line designs. And I hope you enjoyed working in pen or marker today. If you worked in pencil, you might want to consider uh, tracing it in pen or Sharpie. And I enjoyed making art with you today. I hope that you enjoy creating this optical illusion in a radial design. I look forward to making art with you again soon.